Would you like to know how to make better decisions for your business, your people, or yourself? Do you want to recognize when you make errors of judgment that cause the quality of your decisions to drop? And when you are moving away from, not closer to, your goal? Welcome to Because There's More with Laura Ellis. For the next hour, Laura and her guests will share experiences and insights that will challenge and stretch your thinking, help you recognize your biases, and ultimately guide you towards more predictable and accurate decisions. You'll walk away from this show feeling better informed, more inspired, and a lot more confident about your next big decision. Now, here's your host, Laura Ellis.
Hello, I'm Laura Ellis, and this is Because There's More, the show that takes a closer look at decision making. Thank you for joining me and my guest for another great show. And I say that because all my shows are great, because my guests are great. They're very insightful, they're very accomplished professionals, they're very interesting individuals, and I feel privileged and lucky that every Monday I get to talk to someone who is willing to share their expertise for the benefit of how myself or you make better decisions in your profession or professional life or even personal life. I'm also very excited because this week I'll be launching my YouTube channel. And I have been playing a bit with writing on LinkedIn, writing my blog here and there. But now with the launch of my YouTube channel, I'm definitely going to commit to being regularly in the broad social media world, which is why I think it's so amazing that my guest today, John David, is actually here to talk about that because he is an expert in how to build an online reputation. In fact, the show today has the name of John's upcoming book, How to Protect or Destroy Your Reputation Online. So I'm thrilled to have John here today with us. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my absolute pleasure, and I'm very excited. You and I also talked offline about the steps that you went through to actually get to find a publisher for your book, and that's very interesting as well. If we have time today, we'll touch that. If not, we'll have you back on the show. But when I was doing the research and I came, I came across the table of contents of your book, I thought, oh my God, I need at least 2 hours because the every chapter sounded so interesting that I couldn't wait to get to today and hear more about what you have to share, so much insight in a time that it's so relevant to all of us to have to protect our reputation online. And because this is a show about decision making and they are the basis, our decisions are at the basis of everything we do, I would just love to hear from you or you to share with us, how did you come to this point to be involved in this field and to write about what you write?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I have a 25-year career in the public relations profession, working with clients, managing their, traditional reputational issues. We do a lot of media relations and working with newspaper and reporters and working with journalists and magazines and on television. And there was really a one moment about 2.5 years ago when one of my, I was referred to a client that was dealing with what I kind of describe as a rogue blogger. And this blogger was writing posts about an entire industry, and it doesn't really matter what the industry was that for the sake of the story. But the blogger was essentially attacking this industry. And one of the things that struck me, they called me and consulted with me and asked me my opinion on it and what we should do and how we should handle it. And one of the things that really struck me was that this particular blogger didn't really have a high level of technical expertise to really be questioning this industry in the way that he was questioning it. He didn't really have the educational background. He didn't have the professional background. But he had the platform that he had a blog and he had some people who were like-minded that followed him. And what it led me to believe was something that a lot of people, already knew, but it really crystallized for me was that, anyone can say pretty much whatever they want online. It gets easier every day to do that. And sometimes these folks go completely unchecked, and they can do tremendous damage to an individual, to a brand, to any type of entity. And that really is where it started with me. It was working on this one assignment and after I worked on this assignment, I started to think about this as something that I could weave into my business, because more and more people and more companies are dealing with online reputation issues, and they don't understand how to handle them. Most of the folks who reach out to me are in the middle of something. But at the same time, I also realized there was a lot of preventative steps that you could go through to try to mitigate these issues so they don't come up. And it just led into it just led me down a path where there was many different options of things to talk about and to things to address. And I started to get a bit of a following as an expert, because really there was no one in this field that was particularly well known, that was really looking at the whole entire field. And so I started to try to fill that space.
That's fascinating. And I'll tell you, it's fascinating as you're talking about, for me, from many different perspectives. So, I often talk about the fact that emotions, and I had a whole show on that, but emotions play a huge part in our decisions. And unfortunately, as good as they are, they're also bad. So people who are disconnected to their emotions cannot make good decisions cognitively. But people who don't realize that the decision is taken, and when I say people, I'm not excluding myself from this. I'm just referring to us as humans and our wiring and our processes, how our brains work. We often substitute the cognitive part of our decisions with the emotional part of decisions. So we jump from a or interdependent relationship between emotions and cognition to a leading relationship where the emotion takes charge and, let's say, leads to bad decisions, or intuition is based on things that, how do you feel about things, not what do you think about this. So that was the first thing that jumped to mind. There's a lot of angry people out there, and as you said, social media opens up this new avenue. The other thing is that I'm launching this YouTube channel, and I consider myself a broad or lateral thinker. Never did it cross my mind, had it not been for talking to you, what does that mean from an online reputation perspective. So of course I want to continue my brand, but building a brand, it's completely different to online reputation, or at least my perspective. Before we go on and we hear more from you, John, I just want to go through your bio just to read some of the key points. You've already mentioned that you have more than 25 years experience in public relations and communication industries, and that you experience most forms of corporate communication in crisis management, and that you work with different clients. But I also want to say that you frequently write about public relations and marketing, a David PR blog, and your insights on publicity, communications, and online reputation management are frequently published on the Huffington Post, which is a very reputable journal, newspaper, and blog that many of us in the business read. You have been quoted on a variety of marketing and PR-related topics in a number of other national media outlets, including NPR.org and Today.com. You also serve as a partner with online reputation management firm webfactcheck.com, a website that enables businesses to effectively respond to negative internet posts like the type you described earlier. And of course, because some of those negative posts have a legal implication, you also offer legal marketing assistance to attorneys through www.lawsuitpressrelease.com. You have a bachelor degree in public relations from the University of Florida's College of Journalism and Communications. And in your spare time, you're a weekend golfer and an adult leader with the Boy Scouts. You live in Pinecrest, Florida, with your wife and 2 children, and you have an upcoming book that I cannot wait to read. So please let me know when it's coming out, which is going to be called, as I said, How to Protect or Destroy Your Reputation Online. And this is going to be published by Career Press in late 2016. So let's go back to what we're talking earlier. And I'm actually quite curious, if possible, to learn how did the first case you were subjected to end up for that client?
Thank you for the kind words. The first case, it turned out that we were successful in essentially working with this, reaching out to this blogger, and fortunately, he was looking to write something and was digging for information, and between what the attorneys were doing and the work that I was doing on their behalf, we were able to essentially throw enough barriers up to prevent this particular blogger from moving forward. So it was a successful engagement, and I've done, and since then worked on dozens of different cases of online reputation issues, and I've never had anything like that one. I mean, and what the only commonality with online reputation issues is generally that they're all a little bit different. Yeah. And so in that case, we were able to be successful. And, you talk about decision making. One of the things about that particular case, which I sort of look at as my first online reputation case, was that I was emotional about it, because when I started doing more research on how these, on some of these blog sites, some of how these bloggers operate, I realized that it was just, in my opinion, it was wrong. And it's not, it wasn't legally wrong. I mean, they have the right to do it by the First Amendment, the U.S. Constitution in America. We can say we have freedom of speech. But at the same time, when you have someone who doesn't have the standing is making a public comment about something, I'm a very opinionated person, and so I sort of had an emotional response. It was just like, this is just wrong. And one of the reasons that I am in this industry is because I sort of have that strong opinion. I firmly believe in everyone's right of freedom of speech, but at the same time, there's with such things comes responsibility, and so I look at myself in this business as someone who has look at it more kind of beyond the numbers and beyond the business side of it. Sometimes I just want to right a social wrong, I guess.
I was saying that I completely resonate with it, because as you'd imagine, in order to to launch this YouTube channel, which for me, again, has to be consistent, and it is about decision making and how we make, not just preaching about decision making, but how we make decisions in different disciplines or areas, like the discussion you and I are having today. I checked out the channels out there on decision making, and like yourself, I had more negative emotional reactions, because there's a lot of misinformation about decision making, or even misinterpretation of existing research on decision making, that instead of educating the public, is leading the public down the wrong paths, or even using out-of-date information about our brains and how we operate. So I can totally understand. What do you think you get from doing this job? Like, I'm always interested in people's motivations, the sense of what motivated you to get involved, and what motivated you to get involved into a field just a couple of years ago because you were a few years ago because you were involved in this case and realized that it's a bit of an issue with it and nobody's dealing with it?
For me, it was there were a couple of different factors. I mean, one is that the traditional public relations industry is changing, and it's been changing for the past decade. And with the changes in the media landscape and the essential demise of traditional printed newspapers and magazines, or the news magazines have been been phasing out, and just the changes in how people get their information. My profession has been changing, and I saw an opportunity when it came to online reputation issues because I believe it to be a growing field, and I believe that it's something that there's a tremendous void of information, that you still see people kind of making the same mistakes, and I see it as an opportunity for my business to be at the bleeding edge of an industry, and also to help educate people about the risks that they face when it comes to their reputation online. There's just so many things, and as you alluded to, I went from working on one case, one assignment a couple years ago, to getting more cases and having more people reach out to me. And what I realized is that there was no playbook. There was no every case was a little bit different, and I had to do research and figure out how to solve them. And one of the things that led to writing the book was that there's just all this information that I was compiling and understanding learning this industry, that it wasn't compiled anywhere. There was no master workbook on it, and so that was one of the reasons why I decided to write the book.
And you know what? It sounds, everything you say sounds very true to me, because I love business. I'm fascinated about the complexity of every business, even if it's like a 2-people business or a 1-person business. And I'm amazed that with what we've created through our brains in the world around us, in business management, we repeat the same mistake over and over and over again. So what you said resonated with me. If I understand correctly, most of the content of the book, John, came from your experiences. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And so let's go back to talk more about your clients. I know that you describe, but who are typically your clients, and how do you get engaged with them? What do they come to you with?
I actually talk about in my book, and I talk about the different types of online nightmares, we like to call it, and there's really 3 that I believe happen, and the first is has a tremendous amount of decision making involved, and it really we call it when people do dumb things. So when you make a mistake and you do something and it gets captured online, that's the first online nightmare. And those are we've seen it all. The strange little videos that come out, or when people say things, and when people tweet out foolish things, and that's the kind of the typical online nightmare. And that's what most people think of when they think of an online reputation issue.
Give us an example of at least a couple of foolish things, because, what strikes me is that the person who's making it may not know at the time when they're doing it that what they're doing, they're actually foolish.
Sure. I mean, I think that there's there are a lot of them. One issue that came up was a young man who was of legal drinking age, but he went out one night and he got kind of terrifically drunk, and he got to the point where he was picked up by the police, and they were fearing for his safety because he actually drank so much, and they took him to the hospital, and he had a blood alcohol level of over 0.4, wow. 0.422 or something like that, which and some people who have a blood alcohol level of 0.4 die. So that's how bad this guy was. So so the police were worried about his well-being. They took him to the hospital, and he was a terrible patient while he was in the hospital that night. And he essentially broke out of the hospital. And he was outside the front of the hospital, and the police officially arrested him, and they arrested him in his hospital gown. You know, the gowns that sort of tie in the back and where your rear end is exposed and all those things. And that police report was picked up and posted on a website, and then it went, as they say, it went viral. And so here was this young man who has this story about that's all over the internet about his crazy night, and it's such things happen in the world, right? I mean, I've never had a night like that, but when I was in college, I've had some nights I'm not proud of and things like that. But this turned into a national news story, and when the next time this guy wanted to go get a job or look for a job, anytime an employer Googled him, this story would come up, and it was preventing him from getting a job. And so I've seen these situations, many times. And there's a really famous one. There was a woman named Justine Sacco, who is coincidentally a public relations person, and she went on a trip on vacation to Africa, and she wrote this tweet. I don't know if you've heard this one before or not, but she tweeted out, I'm going to Africa. I hope I don't get AIDS. Just kidding. I'm white. That was her tweet. Yeah. And this was a famous one. And she ended up getting that so she was on a plane to Africa, and the Twitter universe went crazy, and they were obliterating her on Twitter. And essentially the thought process was that she actually lost her job while she was still in the air, on that plane. And she landed in South Africa and found that the whole world knew who she was and was ripping her online. So sometimes people just do things. They make a mistake, and in some case they're either they do something behaviorally, or they do something where they write something, or they jot something down, and maybe they think they're funny and they're not, and you end up really getting kind of crucified online. And those are there, and there are many more instances of this that have happened over time.
Of course. And, again, what is fascinating for me is that even at the time of doing it like the lady did, I mean, she saw the output of her thinking through her own filter. And this is it. I mean, we can only be in our own heads. We have no idea how someone is going to receive that information, which in a way is quite scary, because not knowing it shouldn't necessarily prevent us from doing it, but just should give us more pause for concern or thinking. You were saying there are 3 categories, and I was just curious to know more. So what's the next one that the challenge
other one is when you're essentially associated with something that something that went wrong. So for example, there was a situation, and I've covered this before. I've written in blogs about this, and this is an example that's in my book. It was a young guy who worked for was a student at a university, worked for a store at the university, and was an assistant manager at the store. And the lady who ran the store, who was the university employee, she passed away. And they did an audit after she passed away, and it turned out that there was some money missing. And so they did this investigation, and as part of the investigation, police questioned the student who was the assistant manager. Now, they questioned him. They didn't arrest him. They never charged him, and he voluntarily let the police see his laptop, and he was eventually cleared of any wrongdoing. But the newspaper for the university, the student-run newspaper, wrote a story about the case, and they wrote that this student, and they put his name in the story, that he had been questioned by police. So again, you kind of fast forward a couple of years, and this student is out of school, and he's looking for a job, and he's in finance. And so when a human resource person goes and does a Google search on this potential job candidate, they see his name associated with an embezzlement. And he couldn't. This guy, he couldn't get a job. He couldn't even get an interview because and God knows how many times he wasn't even he wouldn't even know what happened, because essentially he's been connected to something that was a wrongdoing, and it wasn't he didn't do anything wrong, but he's associated with it. And those situations also happen frequently, where sometimes it's an employee of your company could do something wrong, and your business ends up paying the price. So so the first kind of online nightmare is one where an individual does something. The second online nightmare is where where you're associated with something that's gone wrong, but essentially you have nothing has nothing to do with you.
I don't know if you have Netflix or you watch this, but I recently watched this movie. It's called The Lost Honor of Christopher Jeffries, and it's based on a real story. And what happened, he was a landlord, and one of his tenants was murdered, and he was the first suspect and taken into custody and interviewed. In the end, they found out who the real killer was, but the guy couldn't walk away. He was a bit of an oddball, so that made it a lot worse. But he couldn't walk away from the reputation all the media, all the news and papers created. So it was a big deal in England, because in the end he contributed to the change in legislation. So it's absolutely terrible when something like this happens. You also talk about a third category. What is that one, John?
Right. The third category is when you are, truly victimized. That's the third online nightmare, and that's when for example, someone decides to write a hate blog about you or about your company, or or when someone is essentially attacking you, and you have no, you haven't done anything online, you haven't written anything online, but you're essentially being attacked by someone else. And again, those situations happen. I've seen situations where kind of a scorned lover gets very upset with their with their former significant other, and they decide to develop a blog about it. I've seen many situations where you have corporations that have where investors from corporations feel as though that the management of a company is not doing a good job, and they go out and do kind of attack pieces and post on social media and post online and create blog posts. And so sometimes you get yourself stuck in a situation that maybe you did something wrong, maybe not, but even it's all kind of a judgment call. Again, if you have a bad breakup, why'd you have a bad breakup? Well, it's really none of our business why you had a bad breakup. But all of a sudden, if your ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend is out there, writing blog posts about your relationship, then you have a problem on your hands. And I've seen that on numerous occasions.
I can absolutely imagine. It was interesting, the emotional implication of those decisions, where people decide to actually go online and attack someone, is obviously very deep. And as you said, I think it's more not more personal. I think it becomes very personal for someone to engage in this campaign, and as it always happens, some emotions tie or feed into existing emotions that are not necessarily inducive of good decisions. So I personally, my husband and I were married in Venice, and I used a hairdresser who turned out to be an absolute crook, and was taking advantage of the local tourists going to Venice, Italy, for weddings. And it's funny because it really angered me, and it spoiled the last 2-3 days of our honeymoon. I ended up at a police station to have to give statements, but I wanted to do something online because I knew that he is going to victimize other people. But in the end, I let go because I walked away from the situation on the right, and I let it go. So I wasn't angry so much with the person. I was angry with the situation, what he created, but then I walked away from it and I didn't write. And it's interesting that people will spend a lot more time to attack someone when there's something a lot more personal to them. We talk about people being Googled, and I know that your third chapter is about that, the internet where bad news stays forever. What did you mean by that? Tell us more.
The concept that you don't need an online reputation is a fallacy, because you will be Googled. I mean, that when you go, employers, for example, when they go to look at a potential employee, they type their name into Google. I mean, they've surveyed human resource professionals, and they've all said we look at people's online reputation, and we look at what they're doing, and they list all the different reasons why people, why they choose not to hire people, and they look at how you're behaving online. They look at what you post about and how you post. And so if a potential employer goes and sees looks at your Facebook profile, and you haven't set your privacy settings right, and they see that you are that they see behavior that they don't think is the right type of behavior that they want to see from a potential employer or employee, then they're not going to hire you. The businesses are being checked online all the time. You decide, from everything from, how do I, what's the phone number if I want to give them a call, or what's the address, what are their hours of operation, where do you go? You type it into Google, and what comes up has a lot of impact on the business. So if someone, one of the things that happens is that some of these review sites, for example, so you give your example of the hairdresser in Venice. If someone's in Venice and they need to get their hair styled, and they type in Venice hairdresser, and up comes the name, and it's XYZ hair salon, and then you type that into the search bar, you're very likely that on the first page of the search bar, you're going to see reviews of this hairdresser on sites like Yelp and Google Reviews and other review sites. And so you have to be aware of all this as a business owner, and also as an individual, that the perception of what you are is driven by what people see online in many cases. And so, the fact that you didn't post this review about the hairdresser, I mean, I understand psychologically why you didn't want to do it. But at the same time, if you really wanted to flag this person, this business, you could have posted a review on Yelp or one of the other sites, and it would have an impact on this person, on their business, and on their reputation.
That is true. So I may be even reconsidering now, although maybe he would have learned his lessons and not have done it. But it's fascinating, everything you're saying. What happens if someone cannot be found on Google? Is that just as bad news as having a bad reputation on Google?
What do you mean? Do you mean, in other words, if you're looking,
if you can't find somebody's name? I mean, I'm listening to you, and I haven't hired people in the last couple of years since I've had my company, but I'm becoming aware that people do actually check employers. whatever relationship, people who are looking for business people, they do
Sure.
check things on Google, and sometimes the names don't come up. And is that just as much of a sign in your experience that that person is not known?
That's an interesting question, and it's probably a question that's better answered by someone who's in the human resources business. But I'll tell you the other side of that, the flip side of that. And
Sure.
one of the things that I hear all the time, and I've heard this from people who have found themselves with an online problem, is they say things like, "Well, I tried to avoid social media. I tried to avoid Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn," and they essentially say, I tried to stay off the grid. That when somebody searched my name, that they won't find anything, and it's a very common concept. It's a very common idea that I hear from folks. They say, well, listen, if there's nothing out there, if I'm not on Twitter, I can't. If I don't have a Twitter account, how can I write a bad tweet? If I'm not
Sure.
on if I'm not on Facebook or Instagram, I can't post a picture of myself in a compromised position. I can have all those things. The problem with that is that the internet will find a way. The internet will, if you don't have a Twitter account and a LinkedIn account, and you don't have any presence online, there's still information about you online. There's still public information out there. If you have a house, there might be a listing for when you bought your house. There might be a media story that you were mentioned in. There might be any number of things. It's incredibly difficult to actually have a clean slate online. And the problem with that, what I'm describing, is that now you're out of control. You have no control over your online reputation. You're essentially leaving it to someone else. And the situations I was describing a moment ago, where I've had people who have online problems say that to me. So what happens is that they're not on Facebook, they're not on LinkedIn, they're not on Twitter, they don't have a website, and then all of a sudden something happens, and they have a fight with their girlfriend, and they have a really bad breakup, and all of a sudden she posts something online. So then the person has no defense. So when you go in and type that person's name, the first thing that comes up is the hate blog written by the girlfriend. Does that make sense?
Yes, it totally makes sense. So I was just thinking to ask this question. So are you saying that really at this point in this date and age, we are actually better off creating an online presence that we monitor and shape the way we want? I mean, one doesn't have to tweet 100 times a day, but better than wait for the internet to create our reputation outside of our control.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, that's a main tenet of my thinking of what I've written about in my book. Most people, if they're looking to find you online, generally what they're looking for, if they're talking about a business or they're looking for an individual, what are they looking for? In my opinion, they're generally looking at how do they contact you, how do they find you, I want to call Laura, I want to reach her business, I want to send an email to this person. Some simple things like that. What's the business's hours of operation? Where are they located? How do I find their Google? How do I get? I want to put them into my GPS so I can go drive there. So you want people to find the real you, and the authentic you. And if that information isn't available, and all of a sudden someone just wants to reach out and find you, but there's no digital data easily available to them on Google, then they're going to find whatever Google serves up. And if someone has done something is attacking you, or let's say again, or you're the victim of circumstance like we described before, or you did something, you made a mistake, 10, 20 years ago that's now found its way online, then you have if you've not built up an online reputation, of any kind, then you're at the mercy of this information. And so one of the things that I recommend is, you should have your main social media accounts. You should have a Twitter account, even if you don't post that much to it. You should have a LinkedIn account, even if you don't spend much time there. You should have a Facebook account. Again, even if you have a small, narrow group of friends, and you don't spend a ton of time there. And the reason is because those are high authority websites. They're websites that get millions and millions of views every day, that are seen as top sites by the search engines. And so if you don't have a Twitter account and you get one and you associate your actual name with it, when people search on Google, one of the things that they'll find on the first page will be your Twitter account. And what that does, a couple of different things. Number one is, if you want people to be able to find you, then they can either find you through Twitter, or you might post your email address or something on your Twitter page. And then the other thing is that if something negative were to come down the road, that's one more listing on Google that the negative listing has to try to supersede. It gives you, I call it the reputational firewall. Try to take control of your own page one of Google search, because that will prevent something, will prevent negative things, having an impact on your results. Sometimes it's counterintuitive to people who think they want to be private,
Sure.
but
Yeah. So do you think that there is any, and as I said, John, this is going to go very quickly, and there's so much more I want to know. So I'm definitely having you back online, and I'm online on the show, because I know that there will be people asking more questions. I received a couple of them. Are you aware of any measurements that internet service providers are doing to actually help protect us? Or does it go back to that old age conflict between protection versus human rights or freedom of speech?
There are certain things. I think that really the main battlefield when it comes to online reputation issues is Google. And Google has actually done a number of things, over the years to help people with online issues. They've, if for example, someone posts your Social Security number gets posted on a website, or other, like a government issued identification number, things like that, you can petition Google, and Google will remove those sites from their search engine. There's a whole new recommendations or new guidelines for how to handle revenge porn, and that's something that's been new in the past 6 months. And because Google is really the main battleground, that's where
Sure.
the most search traffic is coming from. They're the ones who have the most control over this, and they're the ones who are at the forefront of some of these efforts to protect people's reputation online.
Yeah, and you're talking about how businesses should build a reputational firewall. How do businesses do that?
It's a similar manner to individuals. Your business, you should have a website. You should have a website with the name of your business, in the keywords and the metadata of your website, so that it's easily found by the search engines. You should have a Facebook page. You should have a Twitter page. You should have a LinkedIn page. You should claim your business name on sites like Yelp and TripAdvisor. And the reason is that those are all high authority websites that are seen as strong websites by Google. And so you'd rather have visitors who are coming looking for the name of your business find those sites, because those sites are essentially going to be controlled by you. You'll control your LinkedIn page. You control your Facebook, your business Facebook page. You control you can have interaction with people, with your customers on Yelp and sites like TripAdvisor, Angie's List, things like that. So those are the main things that businesses should be doing. Is they should have is really look at those high authority sites, which have the potential to do damage to them if left unchecked. And so you need to go in and look at all those possibilities and make sure that when people are searching for information, they find you, because you want to answer that question first. Again, like I said before, why are they Googling you? Well, most likely they're Googling you because they want to call you, they want to email you, they want to text you, or they want to find where you're located. And you don't want them to find, when they're going to do that, you don't want them to find a whole bunch of negative stuff.
Makes total sense. I know that you talked about staying off the grid is not an option, and you have a chapter in your book, and you reference there your Huffington Post interview with Mark Cuban. So what is that about?
Well, Mark Cuban is an interesting guy. I mean, as everyone knows, one of the sharks from Shark Tank, and I interviewed him. He has a stake in a website called Cyberdust, or an application called Cyberdust.
Mm-hmm.
And what Cyberdust is it's a messaging platform where the messages disappear after a period of time, and so there's no digital trace, and that's one of the areas where he's very interested in that. Actually, he's been subpoenaed he's had his text messages subpoenaed, and he believes that he didn't like that. And one of the things that he talked about in my interview with him was how that when we have a conversation, two people have a conversation and it's gone. I mean, if you're standing face to face with a person, or you're talking to someone on the phone and it's not being recorded, you have a conversation, you say something, and listen, some people, things get misunderstood. There's nuances to conversations, there's intonation, all these things, and he believes that messages like text messages, don't need to be around forever, and that's why he created this site called application called Cyberdust. And when you communicate on Cyberdust, you essentially send a message, and then a few moments later, it disappears.
Very interesting. How about what things can be done? What can be done if something like this happens to you? I know again that it's something you discuss in your present in your book, and I'm just looking at the time, and I know that we're coming to the end of the show, probably 4 minutes away. So if you could just go through those so we can cover them all, because they're very interesting.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, the first thing is that if something negative is posted about you online, or about your business online, the best case is to try to reach out to the source of the post and essentially ask them to take it down, and explain to them why you'd like them to take it down. Sometimes you can go to sometimes things get posted on forum sites and things like that, and you can go to the forum operator and ask them to take things down, things like that. That's sort of the first choice. Is look for a way to sort of negotiate. I say negotiate, beg, plead, try to get people to get things removed. The other thing is a tactic that's called suppression, and suppression isn't really removing something. It's essentially you post more information online. You try to post to high authority websites, and the idea is being to try to push down the negative result. This is the Reputation.com model. And the idea is that you kind of flood the internet and the web with positive things about your topic and about your business, and that'll push the negative things down. And that works in some cases. It doesn't always work. Google is caught up to that a lot. But and the downside, of course, is that a negative post, even if it's on page 2, it's still online. And then the third one is what I kind of call the black ops of reputation management. And there are folks out there who who've worked at these search engines and who kind of know some tricks and know some different tactics, and you can go and they can perform some magic for often at a high price tag, but it can be done where you can get things delisted from Google search or removed from websites at the hosting level. But that's another option.
Interesting. So are you saying that there are organizations out there who can actually, for a high price tag, clean up your online record?
Without question. I mean, it's very specialized, and there's some things that can be done. I've worked with some of these folks. There's some sites where you can get things taken down. It takes some work. It takes some time. It takes some money. but it can be done. And it's an area that a lot of folks don't understand, and it's continually changing because the internet and the World Wide Web are continually changing, and the search engines are continually changing how they operate. But there are always options to dealing with negative information online.
So, John, I had a blast because I've learned so much, and seriously speaking, as I'm getting ready to put that first video on YouTube, and of course link it to everything else that I have, Twitter, LinkedIn, and everything, I'm suddenly so much more aware of what I'm doing. If you had like few words of final words of wisdom for people listening out there, where to look first, what would you say? And we literally have like 1 minute.
Well, I think the first thing is that you have to really kind of like follow the old rules that maybe your mother and father told you. If you don't want, don't say something, don't write something if you wouldn't want to see it on the front page of the newspaper. That's kind of the first rule. Is you got to if you can prevent sort of some of this behavior from happening first, that's your best defense. And I think the other is then the other sort of cardinal rules of life. Treat other people like you want to be treated, because if you don't, then they could come back and bite you online. And then the last one is that there are options when things go wrong online, and they can be mitigated. Like I said, it takes some time, it takes some energy, but they can be mitigated. But the first is keep your nose clean, treat other people with respect, and then look at your options if something goes wrong.
That's excellent. Thank you very much for your time and all the wisdom, John. And I do look forward to talk to you again. And for everyone else out there, have a wonderful week. And I'll be back with Because There's More next Monday. Thank you very much. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's edition of Because There's More. Join Laura Ellis again next Monday at 6 a.m. Pacific Time, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, and 2 p.m. GMT on the Voice America Business Channel. Be sure to tune in, because there's more.